title of my talk is Who Do You Trust and When? And the idea behind the talk is to look at issues of trust in a way that illustrates how these issues influence our health, both physical and mental, and indeed the way we live. Now, I'm starting here with life expectancy. The World Health Organization just revealed these figures earlier this year about life expectancy in the world. And if you look at where Trinidad and Tobago lies, you see that if you're born in Trinidad and Tobago, and all other things being equal, you live a natural life, your life expectancy is approximately 71 years. But that puts us only above Guyana and Haiti compared to the rest of the Caribbean. So, crisis is an overused word these days, but to me there's something that is discomforting about that statistic. I'll draw your attention to something else. If you look at the bottom of the list and look at the countries in the Caribbean that have the highest life expectancy, you see countries that are all still under the rule of their colonial masters, Anguilla, Bermuda, the US, and British Virgin Islands. We'll come back to that in a little while. Now, when you ask yourself, well, how come Trinidad and Tobago could have such a low life expectancy compared to our neighbors, the World Health Organization has also deconstructed those figures to look at why people die and where. And this statistic particularly is startling because what this statistic is, if you were to get diabetes mellitus in Trinidad and Tobago, your risk of dying from it is greater than anywhere else in the world, except Mauritius. So in other words, diabetes will kill you in Trinidad in a way that is much greater than anywhere else in the world, apart from Mauritius. And if you look at the list for other causes of death, coronary artery disease, the thing that is consistent is the fact that Trinidad and Tobago is in the top 3 across the board for most causes of death. Violence here, Jamaica supplants us, but we are second. Road traffic accidents, we're third. Suicide, we're third. And why is this? Now, we come back to trust. There's an organization called the World Values Survey Organization. It's a group of social scientists that periodically survey countries across the world about their values, the things they deem important, the things that they value in terms of their lives. And one of the things they ask about is both trust in institutions and interpersonal trust. And again, unflatteringly, Trinidad, in the left-hand column, is one of the countries that falls lowest on the trust index. Now, the last survey was done, or the last period in which the survey was done was 1995 to 2009. That was wave 5. And the findings that you see there are illustrative of that particular survey. So again, you see the countries that were similarly found to have this low trust index. And this, I want to reinforce, is related to both interpersonal trust and trust for institutions. And interpersonal trust is critical because this refers to your friends and family. It means that we don't trust even our friends and families. They've done a more recent wave, 2010 to 2014, and since we're talking about trust, I thought it only natural that I should review the findings of this recent survey to see whether we have either remained where we are, we've gotten better. I haven't completed the review, but the suggestion is that we've gotten worse. For example, in response to the question, do you think most people can be trusted? Only 3.2% of people in Trinidad agreed with that question, compared to another place where they describe trust is declining, which is the United States, where 34% of people agreed with that statement. So it means that even in terms of that sense of interpersonal trust, things are getting worse rather than getting better. So why the importance of trust? What's the significance of trust? Francis Fukuyama in the 90s was the person who first started disentangling this concept and talked about countries with high trust and low trust. And he said low trust countries have particular problems: high crime and corruption, weak institutions, decreased social cohesion, increased social conflict, poorer health, and increased income inequality. And I don't know if all those things sound familiar to you. And the value of this index is related to things like crime and corruption, because the less people trust each other, the greater the likelihood and the greater the perception of crime. The less people trust each other, the greater the perception of corruption, the greater the occurrence of corruption. So where has all this come from? And how can we explain in a country like this where everybody seems to be happy-go-lucky and things have a veneer of happiness, that we can have these kinds of figures? And to be honest, I don't know the answer to that. But from my work as a psychiatrist, I think there are some clues. Now, Erik Erikson, who's a psychologist, that talked about the development of trust and mistrust, and he said that trust and mistrust are the key elements in the first year of life, and that if a child is not attached to his mother or primary caregiver, then it is likely that this child is going to develop a lot of distrust. And what we found is that 25% of mothers who make babies or deliver babies in public institutions are depressed, and clinically depressed. They have postpartum depression. And this means that that capacity to engage in the attachment behavior that would nurture trust in their children is going to be compromised. And that is, to my mind, one of the central issues in terms of the foundation for this lack of trust in the society. In addition, when you look at women who have been exposed to intimate partner violence, you find that up to 45% of women have had some experience of intimate partner violence. And again, the thread that ties all of them together is the experience of childhood sexual abuse. So again, it means that after that first year of life, the experience of childhood sexual abuse contributes again to this inability and this lack of trust that continues to pervade during a person's life. Now, Fukuyama and the scholars thereafter, including those who've looked at income inequality, have said that societies that form institutions that are inherently untrustworthy, the untrustworthiness comes from the people. I remember a story in V.S. Naipaul's The Middle Passage, where he said that when Valmont Jones, a promoter who was supposed to put on a Sam Cooke concert, fled the country before the concert, fleecing people of the money they had bought for the tickets. When he interviewed people afterwards, they expressed a grudging admiration for Mr. Jones and his ability to deceive the populace. And deception is the real enemy of trust. And of course, there is no worse deception than self-deception. So I think one of the big issues that we have to confront is how do we deceive ourselves? And in understanding that, understand how that deception then impacts on the lives that we lead. Now, going back to diabetes and that high risk of death, several studies have been done in the health centers of the country have shown that many people who come to clinic regularly, get their prescriptions, their blood sugars are still not controlled. And they're still not controlled because for some reason, even though they're coming to the clinic and taking their medication and taking their prescriptions, their behavior is not consistent with maintaining their blood sugar. And that, I think, is a function of some of the belief systems that we have. So this now refers to the cultural influence of mistrust. And still, too many in our society continue to believe in supernatural and spiritual causes for all kinds of malaise, physical malaise as well as mental. And until we're able to change those beliefs, we will continue to have this ambivalent relationship towards our health institutions. Now, what about our other institutions, the police, the judiciary, parliament? And how does that influence the sense of mistrust that people have? And again, we have to always remember that we are a society, and we have to hold the people who we elect to these institutions accountable. A philosopher named Honora O'Neill said that the idea of mistrust has become so pervasive because people have given up on accountability. And they always believe that it's the other person's responsibility to do what needs to be done. So a big message, I think, is for us to be able to take personal responsibility for our decision-making. In psychological terms, it's called having an internal locus of control as against an external locus of control. And going back to the stats related to life expectancy, it might be that it is that conflict between external locus of control, which has been there in our history, and trying to establish an internal locus of control in our present-day life that is responsible for the difference in the life expectancy across the region. So we have to avoid self-deception, we have to take personal responsibility, and we have to challenge prejudices, because the prejudices that we have are keeping us isolated from each other. And that isolation is another big contributor to the lack of trust that exists. And finally, Francis Bacon said that the greatest trust a man could have for another man or woman is to seek counsel from them. So we need to engage with our neighbors, we need to engage with our friends, we need to rebuild our communities on the basis of trust, because if we don't, we'll continue to die much younger than the rest of our neighbors in the Caribbean. Thank you.